Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube and listening, if you're listening to the podcast, I have a truly special guest this week. His name is Travis, but he goes by Jackie's and Jordan's on Instagram. And many of you out there probably are familiar with him because of his vintage collection. And he's been on a few other YouTube channels to talk about his years of collecting vintage. So I'm really excited to have him on and to talk to him. But first of all, Travis, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on.
Well, yeah, well, and you were mentioning how you just got back from a trip from Hawaii, so I really appreciate you doing this the day after you came back from that vacation.
Yeah, no problem. Nice to get some relaxation and get back to the real world.
Get straight back into talking about cars, right?
Yeah, there you
Uh,
go.
so, how did you get started collecting? What got you started, and what were some of the stuff that you started collecting early on?
Yeah, I got started when I was probably about around 7 years old in the 80s. Um,
Hmm.
a lot of the first packs I was buying, I think I got maybe a 86. I got some 86 tops, but most of the stuff I really started was like 1987. I had just, like everybody else, mountains of 1987 tops and Don Russ and all that stuff back when Bo Jackson was up and coming. I was a huge Bo Jackson fan. So yeah, I was really into basketball and baseball. I didn't start collecting basketball cards until I think maybe 89 though, mostly 80, maybe starting 88, 89, somewhere around there. And like David Robinson came on the scene, and Gary Payton was a rookie. So I had a ton of basketball cards starting there. So
Hmm.
yeah, I really was in baseball and basketball mostly as a kid. Um, I yeah, we had I think I heard your last guest. I was listening to your podcast with Neo. He was saying that there was his card shop was right next door to the barber shop, which was my exact experience as well. So I always ride my bike to get a haircut, and there was a card shop right next door. So that was always fun. Um, but yeah, that was just ripping packs and collecting my favorite players, and that was always my thing growing up.
Yeah. And so, did you, like a lot of people, kind of take a break when you got a little bit older and got back into it? Was that kind of the same story with you?
I I did not yeah, I definitely took a break to the extent that I was obsessed as a kid.
Mm.
I was just hyper focused, and to the extent that my parents had to like confiscate my cards from me. So like I got them taken away in high school or junior high, and then um yeah, and then they packed them up and put them in the attic, and they did that multiple times, and eventually it was just like, you're not getting these back until you're an adult. So because I wouldn't do my homework, or I just it was always I was always was just super obsessed with cards. And then, but I never stopped buying packs, and like I stopped. I would say I stopped collecting like hardcore, right? I kind of, but I was always see a pack at Target or something, I'd still pick some
Yeah.
up. And particularly like when a big player would come out, like I had, I bought a bunch of packs when like Kobe was a rookie and when LeBron was a rookie. So I still had a lot of like their rookie cards. Um, and occasionally I'd buy baseball, but I pretty much only bought basketball during that time. And then and then later in and I could say that kind of continued into college, buy packs here and there, but I wasn't, deep into it. And then but yeah, it wasn't until like 2018 or so that I started really getting back and buying more cards, and really buying, some of the bigger cards that I'm chasing now.
Was there a particular reason why that occurred in 2018?
I you know I I kind of I felt like a lot of people were going to get back into it. I
Mm.
just I I think there was like a Netflix special that came, or not special, but there was like a Netflix show that came. I think it was like 2019, maybe. It was
Hmm.
like the Jack of all trades or something, I forget. It was like,
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah, the guy and
and
his dad. Yeah.
I remember like watching that and thinking, man, there's a lot of people who are going to be just watching this and like going back into their parents' attic and just like reminiscing and like digging through cards. And I started seeing kind of like a social buzz a little bit around it too. and this was pre-pandemic. I mean, the pandemic really kind of escalated things, but this was,
Right.
pre-pandemic, like a year or so before. I just kind of got the sense that like a lot of people that I grew up with have good jobs now and can
Hmm.
afford this, and I just felt like it was gonna you know go. And but more than that, it was just the love of it. I just enjoyed it. It was more just discovering that like, hey, this stuff still has real value, right? And I can now like buy some of these older vintage cards that I was always in love with, right? I always had an affinity for vintage.
Yeah.
So, find like discovering that like I could go pick up, some Jackie Robinson cards and Willie Mays cards, that 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 I cherished, that I would have loved to have had as a kid,
Hmm.
but couldn't really have until couldn't afford the big stuff until I got older. I think it was just kind of fun, recognizing that stuff still had real value and real demand. So
Yeah. Well, and I ask because a lot of people attribute the pandemic 2020 as the time that a lot of people got back into the hobby, and obviously it was for a lot of people. But I was getting back into the hobby myself, actually, probably around kind of around 2012, 2013, and then really heavily probably around 2015, 16. And I was already starting to notice a lot of people my age
yeah,
really heavily getting back into it around that 2015, 16 time period. And we already started seeing things on social media about people buying and selling cards, and you already started seeing uh, like blowout forum, a lot of blowout forum stuff. Already started seeing some things on Instagram and some YouTube channels. I mean, there was still a lot of, you know, it's not what it is today when it comes to YouTube content, obviously, but you still started seeing a presence of people getting on YouTube, talking about their collection, talking about in particular vintage stuff and stuff that was really cool and interesting to collect that maybe you didn't even really know very much about when you were collecting back in the 80s and 90s.
yeah,
So I feel like that presence was already starting to begin for a lot of people prior to the pandemic. And I think for you in particular, when you were looking and focusing on vintage going back to 2018, I mean, I think you really hit something really special by getting back into it during that time period.
yeah. There was, yeah. The train was that train was running. I think that
Hmm.
was it was running long before COVID happened, and I think you know it picked up steam. But I think it was really the intersection of a lot of the social media sites and a lot of these tools that are available now too, right? So
Hmm.
you've got eBay's been around for a long time, but
Yeah.
just having that sort of backbone of the marketplace, right? And then and grading had taken off and really taken root, decades prior. But you have all these things together to where social media, and then you had all these tools like Card Ladder and vintage card pricing, and a lot of these things that made that made pricing cards a lot easier. It made, made comping cards. It's like you have all these tools to manage your collections, and then all these ways to share it, right? It's like when we were
Hmm.
kids,
Yeah.
you'd ride your bike with your backpack on and your and your binder up to your buddy's house, and you'd get down, and then that's how you share your cards, right? Oh, flip through your binders and like, look what I got, let's trade. And now it's like you post it on Instagram, you got however many followers, and like you can share your stuff that way. It's just such a really neat tool for the hobby and for collectors. And I think that's really a big part of what drove, that combined with the fact that a lot of us who were collecting are now, a little bit older, have money, and the economy was strong, in some, in
Right.
certain respects. And it was just sort of a perfect storm, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, talk about what were some of the first main vintage stuff you got back in around 2018? What were some of the highlights and things that you were most proud to get during that time period?
Yeah, I started chasing vintage sets a lot. That's probably in terms of like my time spend. Probably the
Hmm.
majority of my time spend was on set building, just because I enjoy that a lot. It's a lot of fun. So I built a 61 Fleer basketball set, which is like that's my all time favorite set.
Hmm.
Um, and I had like and I'd been working on like an 86 Fleer basketball set as well, but I bought like multiple sets of 86 Fleer basketball and then just sort of like cherry picked, the ones I wanted to make the best. And then I would upgrade one at a time. And like, so I spent a lot of time just like upgrading, man, one by one, this card, that card. Um, I also went back and bought a lot of like Jackie Rob. So I'm my name on Instagram, right? Jackie's and Jordans, right? That's Jackie Robinson. I'm a big Jackie Robinson collector. So I started buying Jackie cards and just trying to find, I'm really into eye appeal. So like I'm all about centering, right? And of course registration and color as well. But like I'm just hyper focused on centering. So finding a lot with a lot of these vintage cards, it's really challenging to find key vintage cards that are centered. And so, I've spent a lot of time. So, I've bought multiple 52 tops Jackie Robinsons, 53 tops Jack, and it's like it's always trying to upgrade. Okay, well, maybe I get something with slightly better centering or slightly better, eye appeal, and so I played that game quite a bit too. So the bulk of like of the funds that I've spent toward my collection has been towards some of the bigger key, vintage cards, vintage rookies and stuff like that, Hall of Fame rookies. But the bulk of my time has been more the set building aspect. So yeah,
Yeah, well, that's cool. I mean, yeah, I of course am a big fan of 61 Fleer. I'm trying to get the signed set of that, but
yeah,
that's good. That's quite the endeavor. That'll probably take a really long time, much longer than collecting the normal set that you did. And back in 2018, I'm sure, gosh, in terms of funds, especially, it was probably a much easier proposition to do that back then than it would be right now. Even for like a full set of PSA threes or fours, even that right now, comparatively to 2018, is
yeah,
is quite more of an undertaking.
yeah. I've up those. One of the challenges, especially with 61 Fleer, is that set is so poorly, factory miscut. Everything's just all over the place. And finding true, there are some cards in that set I've never seen a perfectly centered copy of.
Hmm.
I've got some that are like 50-50 one way and 45-55 the other or something. Most of the cards I have dead centered by now, but they're it's a really tough set. So I've spent a lot of time. Maybe one centered copy will surface in a year. Or and on every platform. So I've still bought over time. I've got a bunch of duplicates now that I bought from mostly like 2018 and 2019. I kind of sell those slowly on eBay or something, but um, yeah, I was picking them up for like $8 to $12 at first, for the commons. Now
Hmm.
those go for 30, 40, at minimum in like, mid grade. So yeah. And then, yeah,
Yeah, did you get and you got your wilt back in 2018 too? I'm assuming
I,
the wilt
I've had,
days.
yeah, I think I've had like 4 or 5 of the wilts. So
Hmm.
I forget which one. Yeah. The one I have now, I purchased actually within the last 6 months. It's a it was a PSA 4 or 4.5. I forget. It was, I don't. Where did I? Oh, I think it's laying around here somewhere. It's actually in an album. I have a binder, so they're all raw. My 61
Yeah.
Fleer is all raw. So my wilt is in here somewhere. I just cracked it out. I think it's undergraded, which is why I cracked it out. Um, well, that and I just wanted the full set raw. But oh, I'm wrong. It's not in here. It's in my safe.
That's
So
all
I
right.
lied on that one. But yeah, my full set is raw right now, except for the Oscars, the only one I have graded. But that's what I'm looking to upgrade it at some point for one with better centering. So my Oscar this is one of the ones where it's like 50-50 left to right, but it's not quite centered top to bottom.
Yeah,
So
yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, and it's funny. This one was PSA authentic. I don't think it said altered. I think it just said PSA authentic.
Hmm.
They wouldn't grade it because factory miscuts. They think it's because it measures short top to bottom,
Yeah.
and but I looked at it and I looked at it under a loop and I was like, this thing is not trimmed. It's just factory. They cut these this way. This is how Fleer
Yeah.
cut them. So I cracked it out and sent it to SGC and they gave it a 4.5. So that was encouraging.
So which of your Jackie Robinsons is your favorite? Would you say? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I do have a favorite. My favorite Jackie is this one here, which is 1958 Menko Doyusha Jackie. So this is a really rare card. There's only, I think there's only 5 of these known to exist. Um, it's from, so if you read the if you look at the card over here, there's the kanji says Chico. I think it's Chico Barboza or something like that. It's basically player number 8 for the Hankyu Braves in Japan. Was the I believe he was the first African American player. I think he's actually uh, maybe Cuban, but he was the first black player to play in Japan. And so this is like an error card. They put Jackie's face on the Chico Barbosa card, and this is actually from when he toured in Japan. So I don't know if a lot of people don't know this. Jackie Robinson's last game in a Dodger uniform was actually in Japan. So at the end of his career in 1956, the Dodgers went to the World Series. They lost. Afterwards, they toured, and I think they did a stop in like Hawaii, and then they did a stop in Japan. They played like 20 exhibition games against Japanese teams, and they were there as the Dodgers. This was kind of like in the aftermath of World War II, and in Pearl Harbor, and Hiroshima and Nagasaki, all the tension that had stirred up between the nations. It was sort of like a like an olive branch offering exhibition series. And anyways, Jackie played in that, and he played his last game in Dodger uniform was in Japan. Because another thing a lot of people don't know, after that, in December of 1956, the Dodgers actually traded Jackie Robinson to the New York Giants. And when Jackie found out, he just retired. He said, "No, I'm done. I'm not playing." So that's when he hung up the cleats, and he never played again after that. So anyway, so that's his last card, and it's an error card, super rare, and it's just a really cool picture. It's like got this really deep magenta background. It's shaped sort of like a tobacco card. It's got this sort of like Andy Warhol look to it. It's just a classic picture, and it's really rare. So it's yeah, it's my that's probably my favorite Jackie card. I mean, I suppose 1952 Tops is just such a beautiful card and a classic. That's you
Yeah.
know that's my favorite Jackie card that most people would recognize or identify with. But I've got that sitting around here somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's hard to beat the 52 tops or even the 56, but yeah.
Yeah. The 56 is great too with the image of him sliding in to
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's just what's great about those vintage cards and how they're basically portraits, even the early basketball cards, and just a real majestic look to them that you don't find obviously nowadays. And yeah, you have this
Yeah.
sort of
And
organic scarcity. Yeah, it's beautiful. And you have this real organic scarcity, like you were talking about with Jackie's last little Japanese card that is probably very unfamiliar to a lot of people, and just there's a lot of interesting and strange. I don't want to say knockoffs, but other companies trying to get into the card business and distribute out stuff that were often very scarce and regional or whatever that they probably only made a couple thousand of, and only like 50 to 100 exist nowadays. You see a lot of that back then and during that era that you obviously won't find anymore because everything is very controlled and very you know it's marketed and manufactured all over the world in large quantities. That back then there's so many strange and interesting things you can find all over the world, and it's extremely hard and scarce to find good copies of a lot of that stuff nowadays. And so that's what I always find interesting. talking to other people and looking at other people's collections that really go and find these really interesting things from that time period.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so you talked about your favorite basketball sets. Do you have favorite baseball sets? Is it 52 tops, or is it some other sets that rank really high with you?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I struggle on baseball.
Yeah.
So I love 52 tops for sure. I am chasing the 52 top set,
Hmm.
but I'm chasing it all centered, which is really really challenging. Um, I think I have something like I have about 40% of the set complete. Um, I do have the big cart where I've got like Jackie, Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle, um, but but I don't. I have a lot. I'm missing a lot of the commons, and and a few of the stars. So I'm chasing that one. It's one of my favorites. Another of my favorites is 54 tops. That one doesn't get
Yeah.
nearly as much love, right? I really like. It's just such a unique design with only having three borders, right?
Hmm.
And so that one's been a fun one. I actually did complete that in all centered, which is really tough because the 54 tops especially like getting the two side borders and the bottom border all like the same and with no tilt. The hardest part is the tilt. Almost every card in that set has like 3 degrees of tilt or 12 degrees of tilt or something. So I put that set together, spent a lot of time building that, replacing one card at a time by that one from that one. um, I have a 53 top set. That one's complete. um, I've spent some time upgrading it as well. I think probably my favorites, one of my favorite sets, and maybe my absolute favorite set, would either be 33 Gaudi or 48 Leaf. Probably, I really love those two sets.
Yeah.
Um,
33 Gaudi, man, it's just it literally looks like pieces of art on
yeah,
a tiny card. They're just so
yeah,
gorgeous and really just takes you back to the early history of baseball. It's fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So,
I have three of the four roofs from 33. I'm missing the red roof. I've just been looking and looking for a
mhm.
nicely centered. Well, the right one just hasn't surfaced for me yet. We'll get there one of these days, but
Well, you very nonchalantly said, "Yeah, and I've got the 52 mantle." But
I
I need to
this I
ask, is I need to ask,
yeah,
is there an interesting story behind you getting your 52 mantle or anything?
yeah. Let me pull it out here. So my 52 mantle it's an altered holder. So I'll show you. It's so it's yeah. It's a beautiful card. It looks like
Yeah,
excellent mint. It's in great shape. Beautiful color, pretty. Not perfectly centered, but about as centered as you're going to find this card, right?
yeah, looks like
Um,
it. Yeah,
yeah, which is why I bought it. So my big thing, like I said, I'm all about eye appeal and centering, right? So I think, you know, for me, like here part of the here. So here's the challenge. Like it's been in in the news of the hobby quite a bit lately. All the trimming scandal, and
yeah.
I think when I bought this, you so during the pandemic, right, there was like a huge, multiple threads on blowout
Hmm.
of and like all the online detectives were just posting card after card of like all these high grade vintage cards that were all trimmed, and like the more I studied it and the more I learned, I was like, man, all these high grade cards are trimmed, right? It's like, and I'm like, well, I don't want to pay a premium, for a card that looks good, but but I want to pay for a card that looks good, right? So it's like, and so I was like, well, if all the eights, nines, and tens are trimmed, what's the difference if I find an authentic altered one that's trimmed? And that was kind of my viewpoint, right? So so I at that point I just decided I'm okay with trimmed cards in my collection, and so I bought this with the assumption that it's probably trimmed. I had no
Hmm.
information on the card. I bought it on eBay. I paid, I think, 47,000 or something like that, and it and then so then it arrived. It's actually a funny story. So then it arrives, and the casing was all jacked up all around. It looked like
Oh,
somebody had taken a screwdriver to it and just tried to like get the card out, right?
Oh.
And it was bought through PWCC, and the scans on the listing on PWCC scans, there was no tampering at all on the scans. But when the card arrived, it was clearly somebody. I could take my thumb and just like lift up, split the case apart, like pull it up half an inch. So I called up PWCC and was like, hey, like I ended up talking with the owner and they were like, okay, well, yeah, send us the card. We'll we'll have it like reholdered for you. And I could tell like nobody had swapped it out because I know what 52 tops looks like, and I spent a long time examining that card, right? So I knew it was authentic, but it was just strange that. So anyways, so they sent it off, got it reholdered. Um,
Oh
but
man.
yeah, but I examined the heck out of it, and it doesn't show. It measures correctly. It doesn't show any evidence of trimming on the edges. My, I it's it If you like blow it up on a big screen and then like create it, like drag your cursor over it and like create a square around it, you can see it's like 2 pixels off. It like tilts down from like left to right. So I suspect it's probably a factory miscut, or maybe somebody trimmed it and knew what they were doing because it doesn't look like it's trimmed. Right? It's like that. The edge is the edges look correct under 30x magnification. So I don't know, but I love it. It's a great card.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that's my big thing with the whole trimming stuff. And of course, those of us who've been around for a while have known, obviously, that trimming's been going on for a long time, especially when it comes to the vintage stuff and the high end vintage in particular. If you know what you're getting into, if you know what you're buying, if you know it's already trimmed, and you're getting it at a fair price point with that information, then yeah, it makes all the sense in the world to me to go ahead and get that. Where it's really sucky, of course, is when people get away with it and they can turn a 4 or 5 into an 8 or a 9 and sell it at the price of an 8 or a 9,
Yeah.
and then the people who now own that, and if it comes out later on in particular that is in fact a trim card, and they can't resell it for that same value obviously at that point. And
Yeah.
so someone's going to get left holding the bag when it comes to those cars that gets past the grading and inspections and still get graded an 8 or a 9 without anyone knowing the wiser except for the original person who trimmed it. And they did it obviously to be deceitful, to manipulate the value of that particular card. And so I still think it's wrong, and I still don't care what certain people like Evan Mathis has to say on the subject and try to make it as if it's no big deal from their perspective. It is still a big deal, especially if you're selling a car that should most likely sell for. In the example of the Mickey Mantle, you got, what'd you say, was it 40? But
Yeah.
if it wound up getting like an 8, then it would have been 6 7 figures at that point, probably
Right.
seven
Right.
probably 7 figures at that point, right? So I mean that's obviously the big difference. If you're changing a car from $40,000 to $1 million or whatever, then yes, that's wrong. It is literally fraud.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty scummy. Yeah. Yeah. I struggle with that topic because yeah, my viewpoint is that you know I don't know what percentage. I would say the majority of high grade vintage cards, maybe not the majority of the number of cards, but in the sum total value of high grade vintage. So you take, obviously the tens are worth a much higher percentage than the allotment of tens, right? The
Right.
I would say the majority of the sum total value of high grade vintage is trimmed, and it's like it totally messes with the entire ecosystem. And I think like people talk about, oh, PSA should just PSA should, if they if somebody they find all these trimmed cards, PSA should do their grade guarantee and like refund everybody. It's like I don't think people realize how, like, if PSA even tried to refund 5% of all trimmed cards, they'd be bankrupt. It's like the total value out there of trimmed cards is far exceeds the total value of collect of PSA and
And I, and
collectibles.
I don't see how it's possible for them to go back and find all the trim cards throughout the
You
history of
can't.
their entire company. With when you, especially when you talk about like every single vintage card that they've ever graded, it's impossible. You know.
I mean, they could go into their records and find who submitted what, and if they know who the known trimmers
Yeah.
are, and like, but yeah, it's so deeply woven into the market, and nowadays they're doing it with modern cards, and I believe it when they say, when Evan and all these other trimmers say, like, it's easier to trim a modern card than it is vintage, like, and you see them doing it all the time. And it's not detectable. That's the big challenge. So I don't know. My opinion is, I think we need a different solution to it. I would love to see, like, people are paying these just obscene prices for tens, nines,
Yeah.
like, get a Mantle. It's like, there really isn't you know, there isn't that much of a difference between a six and a nine, holding them in hand, and oftentimes the six is the superior card if you just look at the centering, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and the disparity in prices that some of these people are paying, it's absurd. And I'd like to see a leveling off in the market, to where you have to remove the incentives from the trimmers, right? Like,
Right.
I think that's the only way we fix this problem, is to remove the incentive. Like, if a trimmer buys a seven, they're like, okay, I think I can crack this out and make it a nine, right? It's like, okay, if they mess that card up, now they've lost money because it went from a seven to an altered, right? So there's
Yeah.
a risk on their part, and then but if the reward is so high that they can take a seven for $500 and turn it into a 10, and it's $100,000 card, like, that's ridiculous, right? This
Yeah.
shouldn't be that disparity. And so I think as more collectors wake up to that,
Yeah.
you might see some of that, a leveling off of that, of the pace, of the valuation scale. I mean, you'll always have some, these guys competing for, for like the registry spots and
Hmm.
stuff. But it's like, there's if you're just a collector, and I mean, if you're some billionaire who just doesn't care and just throws money around, like, okay, fine, do whatever you want. But like, if you're a true collector, like, you don't have to play that game. Find the
Yeah.
card. Like, that's why I buy these, like, my my Bill Russell rookie, right? It's like, it's perfectly centered. It's a three. It's like, it
Hmm.
looks better than every five, six, and seven I've seen. And that's the type of stuff that I try to hunt down. It's like, cards that have eye appeal, low grade. Nobody's trimming a three, right? You can't trim a card with round corners, right? So, I'd like to see a leveling off of the market to disincentivize trimming. I think that's the solution. But
I've
we'll see.
been
I don't.
I've been pretty much saying the same exact thing. I think it's the disparity in the market value that I think we need to reevaluate as a hobby community or whatever. Um, I've been using the Michael Jordan rookie '86 Fleer as an example of like why not go for a PSA 7 or a PSA 8? You can get a really amazing looking PSA 8 copy for what, $9,000-$10,000 probably right
I
about
think they're
now.
less now. I think you
Yeah,
can get them for like 7,000 now or something. I
yeah,
I have to
you
double
might.
check, but yeah, they're down.
Yeah, you might be right. It might be lower than that. So
Yeah,
why would you pay $100,000 for a PSA 10 copy of that card if you can get
right.
an amazing looking eight? I don't even know what the math is on that. That's too much math for my brain. But I mean, what is that? Is that a 20x or is that even more than that? I mean, it's ridiculous that's type of
Yeah,
variance between an 8 and a 10 of that card is like, yeah, I understand if you want to get a really amazing looking copy of a Michael Jordan rookie card for your collection. I think everyone wants one of that. Why why are some people paying $100,000 for a 10? uh, that's, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me, and I hope you're right. And what I've been saying as well a lot lately of like we need to see those price points of those tens of those nines come down again because it just doesn't make sense to have that much of a variance, especially if a large majority of those nines and tens are most likely trimmed or were trimmed at some
right.
point.
Or they're Yeah, or and the ones that weren't trimmed were graded to a totally different grading scale. It's like,
Yeah,
the PSA has moved the goalposts on us so much. It's like, you go back and look through those tens, like every serial number on those tens is like none of them start with anything above a two, right? Except for the ones like if it starts with a three, then it means it was also graded way early at like a card show or something, right? But like,
Yeah.
most of those serial numbers start with a zero or a one, right? And like, you know, PSA certs are sequential, right? So those are like, back in like late 90s, early 2000s when those were graded. And you pull up one of those tens and you look at it today, look at it under a loop, like my nines look better than half of those tens. It's like they're not better cards. They were just graded to a different goalpost. I think there was if you know who Jason Kuntz is, he was
Yes.
on
Yeah.
I think he was on Jeremy Lee's
Hmm.
podcast the other. He was talking about how he submitted he estimates he's submitted 75 of the tens or something like that, and he said that he submitted 40 of them, 40 of the 1986 Fleers to PSA. I don't know when this was, but he basically, he knows grading really well, right? And
Hmm.
he's responsible for a lot of the tens in 1986 Fleer. And he said he's something like 80% success rate for a PSA 10. And then he submits 40 of them and gets zero tens now. Like all cards he thought were PSA 10s, and he got zero, right? It's like they've just moved the goalposts so far. If a guy like that doesn't know, doesn't get any tens, something's wrong.
Yeah, I also wouldn't be surprised if his name was kind of red flags at this point at PSA, but
Yeah,
no.
yeah. I think he said he sent it through a like a group sub.
Oh
But
yeah, but
I don't know if he's even allowed to grade. I don't know. I don't want to get into that. I don't know him very well, but
we know Evan Mathis isn't allowed anymore, so yeah.
yeah, we know
No.
that he confirmed that. That's good news.
Oh my goodness. I mean, you have to kind of laugh about it because one thing I try to say a lot, because once again we've had a lot of new collectors come in the hobby these past few years since the pandemic, and a lot of people I think really really worried, really upset about the scammers, the trimmers, all these things, and they do suck. They really do, obviously, for lots of reasons. But I mean, but they have been around for forever. And the main thing you have to just kind of do is just stay educated and do your research and keep trying to get stuff from trusted sellers and trusted people within the hobby. Um, and and sometimes too, you have to just kind of either just kind of laugh about it or not not accept it totally, but just know that it's there. And so like what you did with your Mickey Mantle, it's like I know it is most likely trimmed. It's still a beautiful copy of that card. I know it's an authentic card, and still getting an authentic Mickey Mantle is still like a high it's like a trophy award winning ceremony almost for almost any collector, and they're still pretty rare, or pretty scarce, considerably compared to modern stuff in particular. And so yeah, like I think you just have to have the mindset of I still want a 52 mantle. If I come across one that is still most likely trimmed or altered in some sort of way, I'm still gonna go for it because I still love that card. I just know what I think I should pay for it and what I think the actual market value of that card should most likely be, and not
Yeah,
listen to somebody that may be untrustworthy and try and sell it to me, 5, 10x of what it truly should be worth.
yeah, yeah. I think it's important to educate people. New people coming into the hobby. They a lot of them just think, oh, just seven's better than a six and an eight's better than a seven, right? And they don't learn, so it's like, there are so many nuances, with grading and with, you know trimming in the hobby and like all of these scandals and stuff. I think it's important to educate, collectors on, on what, and there's a lot of resources for people to learn, and all sorts of forums, and and great content creators that are, that are talking about this stuff. I think some people are taking the approach of, oh, let's just stop talking about it, it'll go away, like, oh, I don't want to bring them any attention, right? And it's like, well, you know okay, but people aren't going to learn that way, right? And but there's also the flip side of how much attention do you want to give it. Let's talk about something more exciting, more enjoyable, right? Like, so there's kind of the balance of like, you know, teaching people about it and also still having fun and just enjoying the hobby. So
Yeah.
I can see both sides.
Yeah. Well, speaking of talking about something more exciting and more enjoyable, so what are some other things you have that you are most proud of owning? Do you have like sort of a top five, a top 10 in your head or whatever that you feel like you're most proud of besides the ones you've already mentioned?
Yeah, I've got another. So I got another authentic altered card. You can see
Nice.
a 48 leaf satchel page. This is a fairly recent pickup. This is a really tough card to find. I don't know. I think it's estimated there's like, I don't know, 100 to 150 of these or something total. It's hard to know because the pop reports aren't fully accurate. Cards get resubmitted and crossed over and whatnot. But it's a very short printed card, a satchel page rookie, from the 48 leaf set. So a lot of people, that's a big chase card for a lot of people, and definitely one that I love. This one's kind of a fun story. So this is I passed over on so many of the Star Jordan rookies because I couldn't find one that was centered, and this one is really well centered, and they're just so tough to find centered, but it's hard to see. It's like there's like a little white scuff mark like right here and here, and then after I bought this card, it's a PSA 5 uh, with the PWCC sticker on the back. Maybe that's a Fanatic sticker now. I don't know. I guess, but yeah. So the guy who actually submitted this card to PSA found me, tracked me down on Instagram, and I wanted to buy the card back, and told me the background story on it. He said that he submitted the card to PSA. It was flawless. Like it didn't have the little scratch marks here and here. And if I look at this card under a loop, the edges and corners and surface, everything's like a 10. I mean, like a legit. This card legit would have been probably, even with PSA's crazy grading standards today, it probably would have been the nicest Jordan, one of the nicest Jordan rookies ever, at least an 8.5 or 9. And there's like a pop one of those. I mean, like it's a super perfect Jordan, with the exception of these two flaws. And he has like this guy has, I think, a BGS 9.5 and a PSA 9. He's got like a few, he has multiple of this card. And he thought this was his best one. And he sent it in, and PSA messed up the card. So that's how it got the scratches on it here and here. And so they like negotiated with him, and they had to like, had some, I don't know what what the terms of the settlement were, but they sent it back to him in a 5 holder and wrote him a check. He was so devastated that he sold the card, and I was so excited because it's hard to find one centered, and I finally found one centered, and it was so cheap because of, it's in a 5 holder relative to a higher grade. Anyways, so that was kind of a funny story. That's a cool card. I like that one.
That is, I definitely like that a lot too myself. I've always loved the star cards, and you're right. Finding them centered is so hard. I mean, talk about, factory issues across the board on all those sets. So yeah, it's those are really fun to find if you can find them really nicely centered because it's really hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I have another fun set I have. So the I mentioned I was sort of upgrading my 86 Fleer set. This one was so I think this one started as a SGC 9, and then I tried to cross it to PSA and they rejected it. I sent it back to SGC because I cracked it out. I sent it back to SGC. They gave it a 9 again. I sent it to BGS. They gave it an. I graded this thing like 4 or 5 times. BGS gave it a 9. And then I decided I wanted to put my 86 Fleer set all in CSG holders because I just like them. So now my full 86 Fleer set is in CSG, and I crossed it to them and they gave it a 9. It is funny that PSA rejected it though. And then it's been graded like 4 other times. Every time's a 9 by everybody else. But my '86 Fleer set, I really love this set. I have the full set in CSG slabs. I'm like one of the only people. I would say I have the highest registry set on their site, but I think I'm the only registry. I know that's not true. I mean, there's a couple, but for the most part, there's not really any competition on the registry set for that. But it's a fun set. I really love it. Another recent pickup, my LeBron refractor rookie. This is in a PSA 8. Another example of like you know buying into a card at a lower grade, just low. An eight's a lower grade relative to for a modern card, right? But I'd rather have this than like some other obscure LeBron rookie in a PSA 10. So yeah, I do a lot of buy lower graded cards, and big cards that I like. Another maybe little novelty set. I put these in CSG slabs as well. This is I assure you I do not work for CSG. I just like their slabs. Um, I got the Scoring Kings set. I put those all in CSG slabs. Whereas the Jordan, of course, is an all-time classic, beautiful card. So yeah, love that set.
Yep. I think that's still the set that got all of us kids from the 80s and 90s hooked into those chasing those awesome looking insert sets. That was like the first one that we all wanted to own, especially the Jordan one. But yeah,
Yeah,
they still look great today. So yeah,
yeah, I love all the Fleer, all those Fleer Ultra inserts, power in the key, and the uh, there were so many great ones. But yeah,
yeah, man. Well, that's this really incredible collection. And what? How was it for you? Was it just like grinding and just constantly like just selling stuff off that you already previously owned to upgrade? Was it just a lot of that you've been going through over the years to keep adding those kind of cards to your collection, essentially?
yeah, I think well, yeah, I took. I mean, initially, I kind of I had some money from poker, so but the first half of my adult life I spent playing professional poker. So I had poker money, and I just wanted to do like alternative investments with it. Bought some like Bitcoin or just random things. And then when cards started, when I kind of got back into cards, I just thought that's just seems like so much more fun to me. So I put my money into that, and then yeah, I have just basically been buying cards with it. And then and then as the market, the market did go up, right, when I was buying cards too back then. So so some of the cards I definitely sold at a profit, some I definitely sold at a big loss, right? you know you you win some, you lose some, right? But yeah, I've kind of I don't think there's never really been a period over the since then that where I've like stopped buying. So it's like I kind of buy and sell at the market, whatever it's at. I'm just still buying. So I bought some cards at the peak and some cards at the bottom, but yeah.
So,
But I'm not really a dealer, right? I sell stuff on eBay, but it's just usually because I'm upgrading or moving something or
so you were legit poker player? Like, were you playing on WSP tournaments and things like that?
I was a cash game player, so
Hmm,
I didn't I didn't really I mean I've played some tournaments, but I was primarily a cash game player.
cool. I did that as well back in the day. Haven't really got a chance to do that lately. Yeah, I always I still love poker, and I'll even still watch like Doug Polk YouTube videos, and he's breaking
Yeah.
down poker hands and things like that. I'm kind of geek out over that from time to time, and also
Yeah.
rest in peace Doyle Brunson, true legend.
Oh,
It's really sad to hear his passing recently.
yeah, that was heartbreaking. That one of the few players I've never got to play with was Doyle. I really wish I played with his son. I don't know how many times, but
Oh, you did? That's cool.
never got. Yeah, I played with Todd. I don't know, a bunch of times, but never got to play with Doyle.
Mm,
Wish I had.
yeah. All right. Well, is there anything else you wanted to make sure to mention? Are you primarily on Instagram, or are you on other platforms? Or are you going to be going to any like major events and card shows coming up here?
Yeah, Instagram's pretty much the only place that I really engage. I would say with the hobby to any degree of regularity. Yeah, at Jackie's underscore and underscore Jordans. Um, so yeah, you can find me on there, and I'm always posting. Something fun, vintage. Usually, some basketball, some baseball. I also have some kind of obscure stuff. One other, I guess, novelty item I recently picked up. You'll see sometimes I post stuff like this. This is a ticket stub from Willie Mays game, the 1954 World Series, the catch they
With the
call it.
catch, yeah.
So yeah, ticket stub from the catch game. So I like buying kind of some random stuff like that, and yeah, I'll just you can find me on Instagram and reach out, say hello.
Well, thank you so much once again for coming on and showing your amazing cards. I love seeing your collection and love talking about vintage stuff with people. So I always enjoy these conversations. So thank you for coming on and having this conversation tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.